Good Shabbos, everybody. This week's Parsha is out of Pinchas. In Parshas Pinchas, Hashem tells Klal Yisrael, Tzoror es ha-midyonim, harass the Midianites, v'hikisa and strike them, attack them. Ki tzayru mehem lachem, for they have harassed you, v'nechleihem with their plans, asher niknu lachem al davar pa'or, that they plotted against you in regard to the situation of Pa'or, and in regard to Cosbi, the daughter of one of their princes, who brought about the immorality and the sin amongst Klal Yisrael. A few questions. First of all, what are these two things? Sororas hamidyonim v'hikisa moisam. Harass them and strike them. What does it mean to harass? What is that all about? If you're going to go to war against someone, isn't that harassing? What does harass mean? In addition, if someone were to ask, what was the great tragic crime that the Midianites and the Moabites brought upon Klal Yisrael? It's that their daughters seduced some of the Jewish men, which resulted in a plague in which 24,000 men perished. Say the reason why we're going to war is because we lost 24,000. They're responsible for the death of 24,000. And yet the verse says, because of what they plotted with their plan in regard to Pa'or, Pa'or was the name of the idol, that the women, when they became very friendly with the men, they would bring out the idol and they would suggest to the men to somehow worship the idol or do something to show reverence to the idol. And also because Cosbi, the daughter of the princess, what she did, the pasuk leaves out the main reason. They are the source of this plague that caused 24,000 to die. Another question is that we find that it's not until Parshas Matos, next week's Parsha, in which Hashem instructs Moshe to gather an army and go to war against the Midianites. So why would Hashem be telling Klal Yisrael here, now, which might be weeks or months prior to the actual war, that we are to harass them and we are going to strike them? First, there was a whole census that was taken now of Klal Yisrael, which probably took weeks, maybe months. We weren't instructed the mitzvah to attack them wasn't until later, so why mention it now? The Orach Chaim explains, we think the great tragedy of what takes place when our enemies come is the death and the loss of our loved ones. Without a doubt, that is a horrific tragedy. I'm not in any way belittling it. However, that's not the major and foremost tragedy. The great tragedy is that when our enemies bring sin upon us, that is far worse than when they destroy us. The proof to this is that Purim, when we learn that Haman, with the consent of Achashverosh, wants to annihilate the Jewish people, we did not pick up our swords and go to battle, but we engaged in fasting and prayer. But Hanukkah, here, under the leadership of the Maccabees, not only did we fast and pray, we went to war. Why? Is that the Jewish way? We didn't do it Purim. And the answer our sages say is because Purim, Haman and Achashverosh were not coming to bring sin upon us, but rather to destroy our bodies. For that, we turn to Hashem in prayer. Because if our bodies are lost, our souls remain intact and will earn their heavenly reward for all eternity. But in Hanukkah, Antiochus and the Misyavnim, the Yavonim, they wanted to bring sin upon Klal Yisrael. Lahavira mechukei ritzeinecha. They wanted us to transgress the statutes of the Torah. And they weren't so concerned with destroying our bodies. They wanted to Hellenize us. And that is the greatest danger. For what good is if we are living if our souls are going to be detached from our Creator and we lose the opportunity for eternity and the bliss of the world to come? Therefore, it was decided that prayer and fasting is not enough. We must do anything and everything. Lift up a sword. And therefore, the Or Chaim says, the great sin that was brought upon us, the great tragedy that was brought upon us was the sin. It wasn't just that we lost 24,000. That was terrible. It was tragic. But a greater tragedy is the sin they planned and they plotted, that we should be introduced to the idolatry of Pa'ar and we should sin with their women, because Balak and Bilam knew that the Almighty despises sin and will withdraw his divine presence when there is such corrupt sin amongst us. And what they intended to do was to drive a wedge between Klal Yisrael and Hashem, cause us to be distanced from our Father in heaven, bring corruption of thought and impurity within our lives. That's what the verse is saying. The verse is telling us, you know what the great crime was? What they planned to make us sinful with the Pa'ar idol and the women such as Cosby the princess to engage in sinful behavior. And therefore, how do we eradicate ourselves? How do we remove the corruption of the sin? And this is what Moshe is telling us. Soror es hamidyonim. We must have in our minds to recognize the great, horrific, tragic sin that took place, that we have been separated, distanced from Hashem. How do we bring us back? How do we rejoin and connect with our Creator? First and foremost, to understand that we have to remove this sin. How do we do it? That we resolve in our minds that Midyan cannot be tolerated. People make mistakes. People go to war. There are wars over land and economic reasons. But a war which is designed for the sole purpose of making Klal Yisrael sinful, this cannot be tolerated. And that's what it means, harass. What does it mean, harass? Harass means that our mental state should be one that we equate Midyan with the evil inclination, with sinful behavior that we must purge ourselves from. How do we do that? By recognizing the source of our sin, our weakness, and the source of the sin, the Midianites. And we resolve to harass them totally. And even to the extent of going to war and striking and obliterating them if necessary. Moshe wasn't telling us that we should go to war now. Moshe was telling us, soror, harass, have in your mind the evil of Midian, that it should be so unacceptable that you are prepared to go to war. When will you go to war? When Hashem tells us. Not now, but be prepared to do so. Why? Because of the sin that they perpetrated amongst us, causing us to be distanced from our Father in heaven. And this is the method of cleansing ourselves and purging ourselves from this sin. And that's what enables us to reconnect unto our Creator. This is what Moshe is teaching us. There are those in every generation that rise up against us, as we know. And there are those who plan and they plot in order to bring sin upon us. And those are even worse. I'm not suggesting that we rise up against anyone and we harass anyone, but we should be aware of the great tragedy of that which causes us to be separated from God, who loves us, cherishes us, and that our souls yearn for. To recognize that sin, whatever it is, we all make mistakes. But those who come and to bring sin upon us with the intention of causing us to be distanced from Hashem, those are the ones who are the most unacceptable. And indeed, well, there will be retribution against them when the hand of God is revealed. If we can understand this and recognize how precious our relationship with Hashem is, the connection that we have, and that we could use every single mitzvah, every tzedakah, every chesed, every moment of Torah learning that further bonds and cements the bond that we have with Hashem. And this opens the portals for all eternity, for the world to come. We would jump with great excitement to seize this opportunity. May the Almighty enable us to appreciate how privileged we are, seizing the opportunity for every mitzvah, removing the sinful attitudes, and bonding with Hashem. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay Jewish. Have a good Shabbos.